Welcome back to the Peristyle Podcast, to Inside Troy, to USCFootball.com, wherever you are finding this or listening to this. Thank you for joining Triple Double and I for a continuation of our Peristyle Preview 2025 Spring Camp Podcast Previews, whatever you want to call it. We are moving through the defense. Connor, we're wrapping up, but we're wrapping up with some of the big boys. We're wrapping up in the trenches, and today we are going to talk about the defensive ends. Now, we could have just done the whole defensive line, but there is a lot of defensive linemen. So I thought, let's just split these guys up into the edge rushers and then the interior guys. So we're going to go at the defensive ends. Connor, when I bring out the defensive ends for 2025, what is your first impression of this group?
2 sentences, Chris. The top end talent is there. Now it's time to produce. Boom.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful summation of this room. There is a lot of NFL talent in this room. Now they just have to put it all together on the field, because we know USC was not good at getting to the quarterback in 2024. If they want to be an elite defense, they got to do it in 2025. They have the tools in place. So let's jump into these defensive ends, because you're losing a random assortment of players. You got Jamil Muhammad, who was a long time kind of starter on this team. You have Sam Green, who was great at times in spurts, kind of came on at the end there, gave them some production on the field. DJ Peavy, depth guy, never played, had some injury stuff. He transferred out. And then Solomon Tuliaupupu, the long, one of the fan favorites, guy who suffered so many injuries, former high-end linebacker, went to defensive lineman, was a rotational guy, depth piece. He has gone in the transfer portal as well. So you got a lot of guys leaving, but I wouldn't really say it's a super big loss among the front. I know you're losing a Jamil Muhammad type player, a veteran guy, but his body type did not fit what Dantilin's scheme requires in those long defensive ends. Because we're going to talk about these guys. You have those long defensive ends right now in this room. So in terms of losses, not that much, Connor.
No, I think the guy you'll miss the most is probably Sam Green, and he was undersized, but we saw he had a lot of dog in him, as the kids like to say. He was a solid guy, but sort of like the wide receiver room where there were some losses. I guess it's a little different, but you kept the top guys that you needed to keep, and USC did a good job with that. I don't think we're sitting here and saying, oh, Sam Green would have changed everything. I like Sam Green. I wish he was still here, but it's not like you lost one of these returning guys who we'll get to in a second who have more potential.
Sam Green going to Kentucky in the SEC, so we'll see what he does there, out there. What is their Wildcats, with the Wildcats. Let's get to those returners, because as you mentioned, they are a talented group. You have the senior Anthony Lucas, who clearly showed development last year, but was snake bit by a knee injury that required surgery and was lost for the rest of the season. You have the junior Braylon Shelby. You have the sophomore Cameron Fountain, who was kind of one of the breakouts of 2024, at least on the defensive side of the ball. And then you have redshirt freshman Lorenzo Cowan, who was a 3-star pickup late in that class and needed to put on weight. Connor, he put on weight his first year. Is he going to have a role in 2025? I don't think so, given all the talent they have, but he is definitely a scout team guy, and maybe a guy we'll finally see get some snaps this year, especially in those first 2 games. But I like what he's doing right now. Still got to continue to develop. But it's all about this trio of Anthony Lucas, Cameron Fountain, Braylon Shelby. Connor, just looking at those 3, which one does your mind go to first?
Has to be Anthony Lucas. He showed the most last season before his injury. It's crazy that he still doesn't have a sack in his career.
Insane stat.
He led USC in pressures at the time that he got hurt. You could see that he had gotten a lot better. He just couldn't get a sack for whatever reason. It's his last dance this upcoming season. He has no more eligibility if he plays over, 4 games now? That's the eligibility. That's the redshirt marker. He will not be able to get a medical waiver for last season. It's now or never for him. A former 5-star guy. I think he's the best edge rusher on this team, and I start there because he knows that he needs to have a big year. The stars are kind of aligning for it. It's his last season. It needs to be the Anthony Lucas show next season. If it's not, that would be disappointing.
Wait a minute. I just want to circle back to something you said. You think he's the best edge rusher on this team?
I do.
Defend that. say why that is, because I think Cameron Fountain's the best edge rusher on this team.
I think Cameron Fountain has more potential, but
You're talking about now?
Yeah, right now.
In the moment now?
you don't think you think Cameron Fountain's for sure better than Anthony Lucas?
Oh, I mean,
if he comes back from this injury and he's not the same guy, like then I will be wrong. But if he is the guy that we saw like last season, he was good last season. He was really good.
Yeah, I mean,
remember his tape after LSU? You had NFL draft guys saying this could be the first round guy, and then against Penn State, he was the only one who could do anything before he got hurt. Like I think that he is better than Cameron Fountain right now if he is who he was last season after this injury. If the injuries changed him, then I reserve the right to change my mind. But yeah, I put him ahead of Fountain right now.
Okay. I told you to defend it. You defended it well. Because I was a big Anthony Lucas guy. I'm still a big Anthony Lucas guy. Like, you could see the pairing of him and Eric Henderson was paying off. You saw a more confident player. You saw a more sound player. Again, 0 career sacks is just like a mind-blowing stat when you look at Anthony Lucas. How has he not gotten to the quarterback at least once? And that first one is going to hit like crack when it does happen in 2025. But Anthony Lucas, you saw the development, and you're right. You saw like NFL, like these Twitter gurus, like putting the tape out.
Like, the PFF guys, too.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
even like the no-name guys, like real respected people. As time went on, like it was too bad he got hurt, and like I think we got to be careful about the one-game takeaways. We all know what happened last season when it's like, oh, here we go. But there always is after that first game, like someone pops, and he popped, and he continued to have, without getting any sacks, he continued to put together a pretty good season before he got hurt. He was far and away the leader in pressures at the time he got hurt, and that is very significant to me.
I'm just curious if you could pull up pressures at some point during this thing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Anthony Lucas, yeah, he was, while not getting to the quarterback like that, he was influencing the plays. He was busting up plays. He was holding his line, his side of the ball, and he was proving to be a really good run defender, which, again, getting the quarterback isn't everything, but Anthony Lucas is doing those things you want to see out of one of your defensive ends. 6'6", 275 pounds. You're right. We have to see what he looks like coming off the knee injury, but I see him on campus. He looks to be walking just fine these days, but again, walking and lining up against an offensive tackle are two very different things. So we'll see what they do with him in the spring. If they're going to kind of ease him back a little bit, maybe let Lorenzo Cowan get a little bit more reps out there. But yeah, you're right. Anthony Lucas, definitely one of those top guys. I still look at Cameron Fountain though as like, I know he was coming up raw a little bit. I know Shotgun went to see him out there in Georgia, and he came back. He's like, yeah, he's a little bit raw, but man, just looking at him, 4.5 tackles for a loss last season, 2.5 sacks, and he did that in the end of the year. 4 starts along the way. They needed him, when injuries kind of decimated that position group, losing Anthony Lucas, losing some other depth pieces. Jamil Muhammad got a little bit banged up, but Cameron Fountain, looking at him as like the guy. Like, if he just develops more as a run stopper to go with that explosiveness and like just incredible wingspan and length, like that's kind of first round potential all the way for me. And yeah, I think you convinced me that perhaps Anthony Lucas is better right now, but in terms of overall, Cameron Fountain has to be your guy, which is crazy to say because a guy like Braden Shelby, we're going to talk about in a second, is on this roster, but Cameron Fountain has flashed more out of these guys.
Oh, absolutely. You look at the first year of all 3 of these guys. Anthony Lucas didn't do much at Texas A&M. Braylon Shelby had the strip sack or the touchdown against Nevada. Had the strip sack that Stanley T returned for the touchdown against Nevada.
Tongan, sorry, I got the Tongan. Tongan terror, baby.
So that was nice to see in a true freshman season. But against Power 5 opponents, I don't really remember Braylon Shelby doing a ton as a true freshman. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. But yeah, who popped the most out of this returning group in their first year undoubtedly was Cameron Fountain. So I get what you're saying, and there is an argument. Like, he's probably the number 1 breakout player candidate on the team. I would say maybe Desmond Stevens would push back on that a little bit, but like Cameron Fountain has a chance to be really good. I just don't know if he's closed that gap to Anthony Lucas, who has 2 years on him, who is also a 5-star. Well, Fountain was a 4-star, but Lucas for some sites was a 5-star. Like he has that body, that ability, just like Fountain does too. So you could be right though. Like, I'm not saying you're what I'm offended.
This is why we have these conversations, Connor.
Yeah.
This is why we. It's not great that we always agree.
I don't think you're right, but you could be.
Okay. Well, that hurt my feelings. But yeah, What you just said, like number one potential breakout for this team, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's like him and Desmond Stevens, like pick one out of a hat, who cares? But Cameron Fountain, in terms of what this defensive front is shaping up to be, Cameron Fountain is there. And remember, he was starting over Braylon Shelby at times throughout the season, starting the Las Vegas Bowl.
I have him above him in the depth chart.
Yeah. So, like, I think you have to give Cameron Fountain that nod, especially over Braylon Shelby, and he could be one of your two starters as a sophomore. And, extrapolate what he did in 4 starts to, could be talking about like 9.5 tackles for a loss, maybe 8 sacks, that kind of potential there. Because Cameron Fountain, big time, potential to be a big time player, potential to be a first round pick. So does Anthony Lucas. So does kind of Braylon Shelby if he figures it all out. It's crazy to think you have like 3 high end NFL dudes right now. And again, they have to show it up on the field, which kind of can segue us into Braylon Shelby in terms of showing it up in the field. Would you call 2024 a disappointment for Braylon Shelby? I think so in my mind, just because I put a lot on Braylon Shelby, like expectations for him, and it just didn't live up to that. 5 tackles for a loss and 3 sacks overall for Braylon Shelby.
Unfortunately, yes, I think you have to look at it that way because of the opportunity that he had when you're in a room with edge rushers who, like, it's Jamil Muhammad, Anthony Lucas goes down, so then you're competing with Sam Green, you're competing with Cameron Fountain, you're competing with just guys who you, in theory, should be better than Solo. Like, I had higher expectations for him, and maybe it'll take him a year and he'll put it together this season. I'm not saying he's done, but I do think Cameron Fountain passed him on the depth chart, and this is a make or break it year for him for sure. He's an approve it year, and he is another breakout candidate too. But I think most people thought that breakout was going to come last season, and it didn't really occur that way. Like last season, do you remember Sam Green doing more or Braylon Shelby? Like I kind of remember Sam Green.
Yeah, I remember Sam Green doing more. You were just kind of waiting for the pop, waiting for the pop. Never really popped. Sam Green popped. Cameron Fountain popped. We saw like Anthony Lucas popping with his like play as a run stopper and stuff. Obviously no sacks, but you saw all that happen with those 3 guys. Didn't really feel it with Braylon Shelby. Maybe it's this year. It's his junior year. I think there were a lot of expectations on him, but I still am really high on Braylon Shelby. 6'5", 265 pounds. With Cameron Fountain as like the 2 most freakiest athletes on this team in terms of size, strength, length, and explosiveness. Like you've seen the video of like his freaking vertical stuff.
Yeah.
Like he's up there, and like maybe the best tester if you did like a combine, maybe the number 1 tester, one of your first guys off the bus kind of guys. Him and Cameron Fountain, like NFL traits, drooling with it, dripping with it, that make the scouts drool. Like that's all these guys. But right now, Cameron Fountain has been showing more on the field. But hey, maybe we're here talking at the end of the season about Braylon Shelby breakout campaign as a junior. I don't know, but Cameron Fountain definitely has the momentum over Shelby going to the spring camp.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And that's what's fun about football, right? You might have a disappointing year one year, but then you're back and now you have a chip on your shoulder. How does that motivation fuel you? How does that change the calculation in your brain? Like, this younger guy beat me. I'm sure Braylon Shelby's pissed about that. So let's see how he responds.
Let's see how he responds indeed. And then kind of the 4th guy in this room as a returner, Lorenzo Cowan. We don't have to spend too much talking about him. As I mentioned, a guy who needed to add significant weight coming from Georgia. It's kind of like 225. Now he's up to kind of like 240, 250 kind of range. If you get up to 260, I'm excited to see what he looks like coming out for spring camp. He's up to 260. I think he should play a little bit. He needs a little bit of time. Get him Missouri State. Get him, I'm blanking, Georgia State. Get him in those games. Let him flash a little bit. Let him show something. So I think he's got a really high ceiling for the future. Just need a little bit more development out of him.
If they don't add anyone from the portal, he will definitely play, I think. Like, they don't have a lot of bodies. And even though he is listed as 6'3", 240, we'll see if he's beefed up. Like, I do think there's a spot for a smaller, speedier guy. You don't really have someone like that on the roster. You don't have someone who profiles like that. Anthony Lucas, 6'5", 275. Cameron Fountain, 6'6", 265. Braylon Shelby, 6'5", 265. A guy named Jakeem Stewart, who we'll talk about in a little bit, 6'6", 290. Like, those are all big guys, and that sweet spot for the DN is like 255 on the low end, but really
Yeah.
you want to be in the 260s, maybe low 270s. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if you have one guy who is a little smaller and maybe has some more speed. And if that's Lorenzo Cowan, that's his meal ticket. That's how he can get on the field. I say go for it. Be that speed rusher. Be that guy who is a little bit undersized, but can maybe beat tackles with sure speed. I don't know a lot about Cowan, Chris, just because we haven't seen him. Like, is that his game? Is he more of a speed rusher? He was a lower ranked recruit in high school. Like, when I see him walk out to practice, he sort of looks like a future 265 guy, but maybe like the staff feels like they can have him stay at his current weight and be speedier. That's just an idea that I had just because they don't have that body type. But if he goes on to be like 265 pounds, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, he was a guy who got in the backfield a lot, 16 sacks over his final year. You know, he was smaller, you know, in terms of he was lighter, so he's, you know, using that speed. So
maybe he's that guy.
Yeah. 6'3". He definitely has the frame for it. I think his wingspan is actually longer than a 6'3" type of body. So I do want to see what that weight is when they update the rosters. Is he 255? Is he 260? That's going to be interesting to see moving forward. But yeah, it's hard to like kind of be eye catching when we're talking about like these 6'5", 6'7" guys and Shelby and Fountain and Lucas. But Lorenzo Cowan does not look out of place among those guys. You know, he's a little bit shorter, but he has the span. He's got the body type to be an impact guy on the defensive end.
I thought he looked a little out of place when he first got here, and then he bulked up. He was a huge guy in that big campaign to add weight. Like, he has definitely bulked up. And again, if they don't add someone from the portal, like you look at who played last year on the edge with injuries and just due to other circumstances, like Sam Green got a bunch of time at the end of the season. Say there is an injury, you really don't have any other option but to go with Cowan because these edge rushers, they'll be substituted so frequently. So I don't want to rule him. Like, I don't want to say he's like a scout team guy. I don't want to rule out anything with him. They don't have a lot of numbers. If they add more guys in the portal, that'll change things. But right now, I think he could play.
I think what might hurt him, though, is that they won't be afraid to put other guys out there, like more defensive tackle guys like a Devin Tompkins, who Lorenzo Cowan kind of following that mold of like lighter guy, adding weight. And then I just think they're going to do situations where they're going to put more defensive tackle bodies out on the edge, and that's going to cut into his potential.
That makes sense.
But still get him some time in those first two games. Like, just let him get out there and play in that second half. Let him shake the let him get his first college reps out there. I don't think he played a game last year, but excited to see what Cowan looks like, especially in spring. You know, we talk about new faces, and one of the biggest new faces kind of cheating here because we're kind of putting him in two different categories. And we're talking about Jakeem Stewart because technically there is not a true like defensive end joining the room for spring, but in terms of Jakeem Stewart, a 4-star prospect, number 13 defensive lineman, 6'6", 300, 290 pounds, depending on where you're looking. He claims he's at 300 pounds on social media, so we'll go with his phrasing. But Jakeem Stewart is a guy I think who can contribute both as an interior defensive lineman. I think his future is as a defensive tackle with that frame and that size. You get him up to 320, 3 whatever, but he also can help as a defensive end, as one of the larger defensive ends at 300 pounds. He is really athletic. You know, he only has 1 year of high school football, but he made a ton of plays in the backfield. He could be a pass rush helper in terms of defensive end, and I think it's going to be easier for him to contribute as a true freshman, as an edge rusher, than it will be on the interior. Again, he can make me eat crow with there and could be dominant on the inside, but I think we could see more Jakeem Stewart out on the edge to start before kind of kicking him inside more on a consistent basis. And they have more depth on the interior. So that's why I think Jakeem Stewart could help out early at defensive end. So that's why I'm putting him here.
The coaching staff has said the same, Chris. Danton Lynn earlier at the end of the season. His ceiling is extremely high. Where he'll start, we don't exactly know, but by the end of his career, you'll see him line up all across our front. So he could be playing all over the place. And his body at 6'6", 290, 300 pounds, or wherever. Like, look at Jordan Birch at Oregon. He was an edge rusher, 6'6", 295 pounds, 5-star recruit. So there is a precedent of guys at that size playing on the edge. And Liatu Latu is like the sexy name that we all talk about with Danton Lynn. He was a little bit smaller at 265, so it looks like Jakeem Stewart, as a recruit, he was in that 265, 270 range. He has gone the other way where he's added weight, where I think Latu might have lost a little weight to try to be quicker. But you could still play on the edge with that size, and I think a good comp with him is Jordan Birch. The one thing I'll say about Birch is this was his 5th year in college at Oregon. He spent 2 at South Carolina. He was a 5-star kid, so highly ranked, just like Stewart. But he was having this huge impact later in his career. A lot of people think Stewart's going to come in and do really well. I am a little skeptical of that. I think he certainly will get opportunities and could have a huge season, but like there's just so much more evidence of guys needing a lot of time at this position. So we'll see what he does.
Yeah, I'm not in the boat of Jakeem Stewart's going to be All-American off the bat right there, starter day one. I think he's going to contribute, but I don't think it's going to be at that kind of day one starter kind of level. Again, we're talking about a player who only played 1 year of high school football, which is something that's going to be pointed out a lot. But I do think he's supremely talented, and he has the right mindset to be a guy who wants to work hard, going to do whatever he can to, listen to the coaching, get coached up. He's driven to be great, and I think he's going to be great for USC. And I think he's going to contribute in year one. Especially, it helps that he's an early enrollee. That's why we're talking about him here. But Jakeem Stewart, I think, is going to play a role for this defense. And I think it's going to be starting out at defensive end, which just looking at that on paper, Connor, Anthony Lucas, Cameron Fountain, Braylon Shelby, Jakeem Stewart, like that is a ridiculous foursome just right there. That's ridiculous in terms of like the talent upon talent that you have at defensive end.
Absolutely. That goes right into my strength. Just quickly, before that, I talked about the Jordan Birch comp. So Colin Simmons at Texas, true freshman, had a huge year for them. He's smaller, so the body's different, but that just goes to show if you're ready and you can play, that they'll have you play. So I'm not saying like there's no chance Jakeem comes in and has an amazing season. That he certainly could. But yeah, so are you ready to go to strengths?
I'm ready to go to strengths.
Because that played right into my strength.
Yeah.
I have body types and NFL potential. I mean, the guys look the part. Anthony Lucas, I went over all their heights and weights. Like Anthony Lucas, you can see the 5-star like body type. Same with Cameron Fountain, that top 100 body type. Same with Braylon Shelby. Same with Jakeem Stewart. Lorenzo Cowan is getting there. Like these guys look like how you want your defensive end group to look. And not to throw shade at other position groups, but it's not like that all across the roster. I think the linebacker group doesn't look like that classic USC Brian Cushing linebacker group, where this group, like the production hasn't been there yet. It hopefully will get there this year, but that's what you want a USC edge rusher group to look like, and you can't say that about a lot of other position groups. That makes me happy. The fact that it looks like how you want it to look like, not that you can't say so, but the other groups. I don't want to get anything twisted out there. Like this is when we talk about needing to recruit and what you're looking for. Like this is what recruiting at a high level does, and just stacking blue chip guys on blue chip guys. These guys look like they're ready for the next level. That's significant.
Yeah, I just like the way you say it. That makes me happy.
That's what I want.
It makes a lot of USC fans happy as well. I have kind of the same vein as you. Pound for pound, most NFL potential anywhere on the roster. It's right here at defensive end. You want to find the future like first round picks right here at defensive end with USC's 2025 roster. That's where it is. So yeah, one of the biggest strengths of this team is just like all four of those guys I just mentioned, Lucas, Fountain, Shelby, Stewart. Like I feel like all those guys are like first off the guys bus.
Yep.
Like just put them off the bus and let them intimidate everyone on the opposing side. Like that's what it looks like. So really, really excited about this group moving forward, but kind of plays into the weakness for me is that it's all potential over production at this point, because what you have 5.5 career sacks between those four guys. And we know how much USC struggled to get the quarterback last season. They need someone to be in that 9.5 sack range. They need someone to be in that double-digit kind of range. You need a lot more sacks out of this group. Again, that's a whole defensive line in total, but we're talking here about this NFL potential. What do they want you to do in the NFL? Bring the quarterback down. And that's what this group needs to do in 2025.
Yeah, Lucas, Fountain, Shelby, Cowan, all on the roster last season. USC 99th out of 133 teams in sacks, 122nd out of 133 teams in team tackles for loss. So you need to see more from this group. And it's a little harsh, but on my weakness, I just have no one's really done much. No one has done a whole lot. And I'll just, like we talked about Sam Green, he kind of popped. Like, is there a Anthony Lucas or Cameron Fountain or Braylon Shelby or Lorenzo Cowan moment? Like, Cameron Fountain made some nice plays at the end, and was it Rutgers he had a sack? Like, he looked pretty good, but in like a third and gotta have it in a meaningful game, like in the fourth quarter, is there one moment that from last season where you can look at, oh yeah, I remember him doing this in this spot? Like, it was a lot of potential and not a lot of production. So very similar weakness to you, Chris, from me, but I think that's valid. I think that makes sense. I do think, though, like, I don't know if all these guys will become first-round picks. That's crazy, but, like, it has to get better than it was last season, right? Like, I don't predict it to be the same.
It has to. The one, like, pop moment I can really think about is maybe the Braylon Shelby tackle for a loss in the LSU game.
LSU game, yep, okay.
And that's where you thought, like, oh, okay, maybe this is something moving forward, and then didn't really pan out like that.
Yeah, and that's the first
game
game
that was a huge play. I will say that was a huge play.
Yeah, no, I remember that play.
And one of the biggest games that they played. So, but you need more of that.
Yeah.
That's the only pop moment I can think about with Braylon Shelby right now. So
thanks for keeping me honest, because that is a good one.
Yeah, that's the only one that kind of came to mind for me. But need more of those pop moments for these guys moving forward. They need those plays that start building up. Maybe one play it's Anthony Lucas, maybe two more Cameron Fountain, then Braylon Shelby gets in it. Like, as your offensive tackles, like on the side, like, coach, they have all these dudes coming at us right now. We need some help. Give us some chips or whatever. So that's what you're hoping is it looks like in 2025 for this group. Final thoughts, which is kind of our early starter projections. We know all four of these guys probably going to play, but who are your day one starters? You feel like? I feel like it's Anthony Lucas and Cameron Fountain for me.
That's what it's like for me too. Lucas, I would put first. Fountain, I would put second, with Shelby battling him, but Shelby will be right in the mix too. So if he's starting, I'm not totally shocked by that. We'll see how Lucas comes back from his injury. We'll see what kind of offseason Braylon Shelby has, but all three of those guys will be in the mix. Jakeem Stewart will be in the mix too. And he's the one guy, Chris, I think, out of this recruiting class that could play and maybe even start in his first year is Jakeem Stewart. So if he has this huge offseason and he's starting alongside Anthony Lucas or Cameron Fountain, that wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the guy, like, I would not blink twice if you're like, he's going to start multiple games this year. Yeah, that makes sense. That's what they got him for. That's why they went all in on him, to be that guy early for this team. And I'm excited to see how many sacks out of this group. Connor, I'm going to throw you a curveball. Who leads this position in sacks? Just off the top.
I'm so high on Anthony Lucas, clearly, so I'm going to roll with my guy. I think it's going to be him in his last season of eligibility, like now or never. That pressure, I think, will mean something. And at this position, you need reps and you need time, and I think, like, the time is right for him if he looks good off this injury. Let's see how he moves around in the spring. That's a huge caveat to all of this, but assuming that he's back to his normal self because he got hurt in the middle of the year last season, I think it'll be him. But, like, Cameron Fountain will be right there too.
All right. Well, that kind of plays into our final question, which comes from Knife 938. Who between Shelby, Lucas, or Fountain will step up and have the biggest impact? I kind of round that up to who will be the biggest impact in terms of who's going to have the most sacks, which I just asked you. You said Lucas. I'm going to say Fountain.
Okay.
I'm back in Fountain, 2.5 sacks. I like what he did in that really small sample size. I think he could be the leader of this team. And I think Anthony Lucas could do it as well. But I'm just looking at that 0 career sacks. Like, he just needs to get that first one. When is that first one going to happen? He's the most dependable of the unit, I feel like. So he earns the right to start for this defense based on how much develop he showed. But he needs to get in the backfield. At least Cameron Fountain has showed he's already capable of getting in the backfield. Not saying Anthony Lucas hasn't. I just need to see it on the field. I just need that first sack to come. That's why I'm kind of leaning towards Fountain, who I think has kind of that pedigree first-round potential if I had to pick one to go first round.
I do have the pressure stats from last season, if you'd like to hear them.
Yes, yes, I would.
In 12 games, Braylon Shelby had 20 pressures, which led the team. In 13 games, Devin Tompkins had 16 pressures, which was second place. And then I'll just keep going here. Cam Fountain in 8 games had the third most, 15. He was tied with Gavin Meyer, who did that in 13 games. Jamil Muhammad did that in 13 games as well with 15. And then Anthony Lucas in 6 games had 14. So by the time USC had played 6, he was well ahead of everyone else. Most of those guys who I just mentioned are back. So the only two who aren't are Meyer, and Muhammad. Pretty good.
You
Devin
said-
Tompkins too, baby.
You said Fountain with 15 pressures in 8 games?
Correct.
And Shelby had 21 in 13 games?
20 in 12 games.
Okay, so
Throw
5.
a lot of numbers at you.
Yeah, 5 difference, and Cameron was right on his heels with less games. So,
Yep.
but that's a nice stat for Shelby. 21 pressures,
20.
20 pressures. Sorry, 21. I don't know why I said 21. 20 pressures, which is a decent number.
Yeah, but that's what you want your third guy to have 20. You don't want your first guy to have 20.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Third point is a good point as well. So, and only 3 sacks to show for it. So that number needs to be much higher, and we'll see. So, Anthony Lucas for you, leading sack. Cameron Fountain for this guy here as a leading sack.
No, when we both pick those guys, it'll probably be Braylon Shelby.
It'll be Lorenzo Cowan with 12 and a half sacks out of nowhere. Quick one. Jakeem Stewart, over under 5.5 sacks.
That's a lot. I'm going to go under.
Okay, fair enough. I would probably go around 4.5 too, or that's where I would be for him. So we'll see what
The
happens.
schedule is favorable early in the year. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I do think that's a lot for there's just so many bodies, especially in the middle of the defensive line, which we'll get to in our next video. I'm not this will be clipped if he gets the 6 in the Michigan State game, but it just seems like a lot to me, so I'm going to say no.
All right, Connor, thanks for joining me, talking about a very special potential room in defensive end, and we're going to wrap up with our defensive tackle preview. So check out and be on the lookout for that, and we'll catch you on the next one.